Good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for tuning in. John Kelly, Profiler here, and welcome. Welcome to a show we're doing today that's pretty sad show. It's about Gabby Patillo and Brian Laundrie, and both of them are deceased. Pretty sad, crazy situation, as you'll see as we're getting into it. And we want to send our condolences out to the families because this was a very, very tragic and heartfelt loss, I'm sure, for both families. And I mean, what other way can you define a situation like this other than being extremely sad? We're going to be looking at it today from a different viewpoint. And I'm wondering if, hold it one second.
You can keep going.
Oh, okay, so just checking there what our producer one, and I'm wondering exactly on how you're going to digest the information that we're going to put out today. I found it to be very interesting from Dustin Rank, who is an extremely professional artist, and he's extremely well at explaining art and the meaning of art. As far as I'm concerned, he's the best I've ever met. And I want you guys to feel free to comment on our show today. Feel free to comment on what we have to say. Please feel free to give us any of your viewpoints. We'll take it from there. We're always interested in your comments. Please continue to subscribe. We can't thank you enough for all the subscription and all the participation we've gotten from you. And hopefully you'll enjoy today's show. It's going to be a little different, and we're going to be focusing on Brian Laundrie's art. A lot of it's going to be focused on that. At this point in time, I'd like to introduce Dustin Rank, and he's going to start analyzing and talking about Brian Laundrie and his art. Dustin, welcome.
Thanks, John. Good to be here with you again. Good to see you, my brother.
Good to see you. So anyway, when we were talking the other day, you really hit on some points of interest for me. You talked about the fantasy, okay, and how some people can have this internalized anger that they're carrying around and can exhibit it in their art, and also how a fantasy for their future can be kind of soothing. I call it soothing, where they may be dealing with some insecurity, inferiority, or inadequacy, and it may be igniting a certain rage inside that they're kind of keeping submerged because of this fantasy and these illusions of grandeur that they feel are going to be down the road. But what do you see? What can you say about this so far?
Yeah, kind of back to our conversation, you have this, obviously, this really sad situation. You have this, young woman and this young guy, and, he's got just this tremendous amount of like really powerful symbolism that he has, through his social media and whatnot, kind of projected out to the world, which in and of itself it's certainly not unusual. I mean, we surround ourselves with symbols all the time, from the cars we drive, the clothes we wear, to tattoos we wear, it's certainly not strange, but when I see a young guy like that, like projecting that level of intensity, is interesting to me because you kind of you take another side look of the stuff that he was doing with Gabby, like being outdoors and kind of like a free spirit and pretty clean cut young man. And that was kind of a weird, it was a weird thing for me to kind of see that. It's not super unusual, but knowing that the situation happened, and we don't know that he committed any of it, as we have talked. I mean, we don't have any proof of any of it, but what we do have is a bit of a roadmap. He was certainly trying to tell us something, and I've used this example before, where a lot of young people and older people too, but mostly young people, as they're kind of coming of age and figuring out their place in the world, if they have a certain like could be anger or level of intensity inside of them, they are going to gravitate to powerful imagery. But I think a lot of times symbolism gets a little bit discounted as the weight that it can carry. And so when you're surrounding yourself with this stuff, whether you're getting it tattooed or you're saying to the world, you're putting this stuff out there to say, this is my identity. It can be a lot to carry around. There's a certain level of, I don't, I've said it before, but it's like the weight of the symbolism can get overwhelming to people. It's almost like they're bringing it inside, but they maybe haven't like lived up to it yet. You know what I mean? Like there starts to become this internal conflict, where they've got this, like everyday life, kind of a normal life, but something inside of them is telling them to take another step. And you see this with, like we talk with gang guys all the time, where, I've been tattooing guys, young dudes that, man, they turned 18, they got out of school, and, summer goes by and you see them like in the fall, and man, like they went like, they got fully like tatted up and, started like really bringing that gang symbolism into their world and into their tattoo, and the way that the lens that they're looking through is now kind of filtered all through this symbolism and imagery. And so, they're either got to lean into it and go forward, or it really does start to eat them up inside, because they've got all this, not only the pressure of that social circle, but just the weight of the imagery carrying it around. Like that can be a lot for a person, especially a young person that maybe isn't quite as skilled at balancing all that stuff, and as we talked, like I've got some tattoos that are like that too, but that symbolism is different for me. I'm not in a gang and I'm not out, putting in work or anything like that. It's for a specific reason. But when you carry that around, you have to be mindful of that, and you have to give it its due respect. Otherwise, it can really play it can really play on your head and your heart as well.
No question about it. And I'm glad you brought out about alleged, because everybody's innocent until proven guilty in a court of law.
Totally.
This is another major wrinkle in this case. Okay. Gabby's found murdered. Okay. She's murdered down by a creek. Okay. And where was that again? Colorado. Am I correct with that? It was in Colorado. And if I'm not correct, I'm sure somebody will correct me on it, but they were all over through that whole area up there. So, but anyway, so she's found murdered by a creek, and she's not found, for like 3 to 4 weeks. Okay. So we know, for the work we've done profiling and profiling murder cases over 20 years, that if a body's not found right away, it's going to become, subject to the animals and the elements. Okay. I have not heard about any DNA, found like under Gabby's fingernails or anything like that, or I don't know how much, God bless her, could have been left of her remains, and because of, again, the elements and the animals, right? So what's ironic here is then you have Brian, who, is alleged to have committed suicide. The FBI, that's the FBI talking, saying he committed suicide. And they found the gun and everything. Okay. And then they found a notebook, and in the notebook, the FBI are alleging that they believe he wrote enough information in that notebook where he said that he was responsible for Gabby's death. So, yeah, again, these are allegations and everything, and certainly, we have to believe the FBI, but he's innocent of proven guilty in court of law. And as Gabby remains our, kind of disintegrating, if you will, over that 3 to 4 week period, by the creek, Brian sets himself down near a body of water in another type of park in Florida, allegedly commits suicide, according to the FBI. And then his remains are devoured and, destroyed by the elements and the animals as well. So I just think the two crime scenes are extremely ironic here. Okay. And, it's kind of like a stranger Romeo and Juliet kind of thing where, something happened at this campsite and Gabby ended up dying. Gabby ended up being killed, and killed in a pretty gruesome fashion because she was strangled, and it takes a while to strangle someone. Now, supposedly, through the allegations that she's being strangled by somebody that supposedly loves her, right? But how many times have we seen this in with domestic violence, where I love you, I love you, I love you, but if you're going to leave me, I'm going to kill you. I mean, how many domestic violent murders have we seen and continue to see over the years, where the most dangerous part of the relationship is when the woman tries to leave the man in most cases. So it sets off a rage. What's at the bottom of that rage that can cause somebody that tells you they love you, but constantly abuses you and then finally kills you. I mean, what is it? It's sure there's a certain amount of, power and control and narcissism and all that involved. But what is that initial trigger with that killer? What triggers that person to escalate his violence to murder at the thought of his significant other leaving? What is it doing to his psyche? As you brought up, what is it doing to his fantasy of, on one hand, of having this woman who he loves being loyal to him and this and that, and him staying with her and her not leaving him. And there's all different dynamics that go on with this stuff, and this fantasy maybe, and I don't know for sure, but maybe in Brian's case and in Gabby's case, their fantasy was to become very successful with him filming and producing her as a major influencer, internet influencer. And that was their fantasy, to become extremely successful. And she was a gorgeous girl. She was very charismatic, projected herself very well. He took a lot of great shots of her. So, I mean, things were flowing along, and then all of a sudden, boom, something happens, right? Now, I don't believe that this just happened out of nowhere. I believe this was simmering for a while with Brian, and maybe even with her on their journey, because maybe the success that they were fantasizing and believing was going to happen was not happening, or was not happening quick enough. Okay. And they started to become disillusioned, and that can cause some anger and some trouble within a relationship, and one thing can lead to the other. And I really feel that if Brian felt that Gabby wanted out, that Gabby was leaving for whatever reason, and this was going to be the end of their influencing marketing campaign, that this was going to be possibly the end of his fantasy. Now, if his whole world and all his worth and his ego is based on Gabby, that quickly it's gone. How can that not cause some real strong emotions? However, becoming or leading any person into becoming a murderer is really top of the mountain. I mean, that's really an internal explosion of rage that becomes externally projected onto another human being. And we see that simmering rage, like I feel I've seen it, and I'm only now talking about his art, my opinion of his art. And that's why I got in touch with you, because I really don't know much about art, But when you look at his art, what exactly, was there anything specifically that jumped out at you? And we're going to put his art up. We'll put a link in the description for Brian's art, and we want the audience to comment on it, to get back to us. I mean, were the signs there that inside was a really angry, rageful kind of guy under the surface of a very seemingly pleasant guy, most of the time quiet, kind of introverted kind of guy? But then we did have some warning signs where he had arguments with other people that that the media brought out. And so we started to see some warning signs that something was starting to erupt, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's, And again, it's like when you look at his artwork, the thing that kind of struck me right out of the gate was it had a real kind of like a predatory feel to me. It was so much a like opposite mirror image. Like if you segregated like what he and Gabby were doing versus his personal stuff, where you have Gabby with this, she's got her van and, camping and being outside and all this cool stuff. But then you look at like the stuff he was projecting and putting out on his social media. It's like, it's kind of like, you got guns and blood and just this real heavy stuff. And I'm like, wow, man, there was a picture of a tattoo that I'm sure it wasn't his, but he had posted that was like a "do not resuscitate" type of thing. It's real fatalistic, And when I start seeing stuff like that with this young, if you see that on some guys, some gangbangers page, you're like, yeah, that seems pretty normal, or a guy's page, because that comes with the territory. And if those guys are living that life, that's just how they are, and I ain't judging. It's just how they are,
Yeah, that's their life.
That's their life. Yeah.
World they live in.
Yeah, they've been steeped in it oftentimes, multiple generations of it. But when you see just like kind of a everyday average kid, projecting that type of stuff, and we kind of got onto a conversation about that predatory aspect of how that struck me. And you had brought up, about the crime scenes and how their bodies were, near water. Where do predators go? They go to the watering hole, man. Like he's such a visual guy, and he really did have a good eye for well done art. I have to believe that maybe, and again, we don't know that he killed her, but if he did, I have to believe that none of this was really by accident. Because his fantasy life was pretty rich from my perspective, that he had to have somewhere along the way been playing out some pretty intense stuff in his mind, exerting power or doing powerful stuff, whatever that might have been to him. I don't know, because it's different for everybody. But you start to kind of, when you're looking at symbols and artwork, especially, it's all about patterns. Everything is a pattern. And, oftentimes as an artist myself, you start to gravitate toward things, or you're creating content, or whether it's musical or visual, and because your antenna is open, and your heart and your mind are open to, being influenced, because that's how you create stuff. You can't, nothing happens in a bubble. Hell, every cool band we ever listened to as a kid, that music had an origin somewhere. They didn't just like Shazam, like come out with it. Like, it's a lot of that stuff is compiled, or pieces of it are, influence from, and the art world is no different, and the tattoo world certainly isn't any different than that either. So when I saw that and started to see, like, wow, like what could really be going on in his brain, because he obviously wasn't shy about posting it or conveying that message. I mean, there was the thing that really piqued my interest, John, was early on in this case, on his Instagram page, there was like and it's not there anymore, but there was like a little, like a reel, like a few second, it was like a little vignette of Brian. Couldn't remember if he was coming and going, but it was like he had like a little art room where you could see those images that have now become so famous, like the skeleton and the blood and the animals with the guns and the phone, and all that stuff. There was like a little room that he had what looked like, like his art room. And, like, I mean, honestly, my room isn't a whole lot different. I mean, I got art stuff everywhere, guitars and, that. So it wasn't unusual necessarily, but it kind of just goes to the fact that, man, this guy had a creative presence. He was visualizing and thinking about things. He was surrounding himself, and that was the thing. He surrounded himself with all the cool stuff he had going on in his life. Like, wow, he surrounded himself with some pretty dark stuff. But if you're a lot of young guys and young women too, like they can have, obviously, we grew up too, and you have intense feelings. You got a lot of things changing in your life, physically and emotionally. It's real easy to kind of gravitate to it, but something about that imagery for him, like, latched onto him. Something in his psyche, something in his heart, that I don't necessarily I don't think he started off with like a malicious intent with
No.
it at all. I don't
Right.
believe that for a second. But somewhere along the way, symbolism can do that to people. If you go back and you start reading history, John, and I know you have, and you've been around, people have done some pretty catastrophic stuff in the name of a symbol or symbolism or a certain level of branding. It can be really, I mean, it can change a national consciousness. It's so powerful, and you take that to an open-minded, kind of innocent kid. Wow. That stuff can really tie a person up inside. It can really, it can flip somebody. And like I said, I've seen it a lot, like young people coming in and out of the shop, and you see them 2-3 months later. It's like, wow, like they literally carry themselves different. Like they physically have changed, not because of the visual aspect of the art, although that is part of it, but they physically carry themselves differently. And and I'm not comparing Brian to this example at all, because I never knew the kid, but during the Jeffrey Dahmer case, one of the kids that was one of his that he attacked or had some interaction with was explaining to, I think, the prosecutor about, like, man, 1 minute they're having drinks and, they were at the mall or whatever. And he said he like literally turned around and, Jeffrey was standing there, and that he freaked out because his physical presence had changed, because whatever that was inside of him, just boom, it came forward, because that was his way of getting his fantasy completed. It was literally like a Dr. Jekyll, a Jekyll and Hyde type of thing, because we know that he wasn't, in the case of Dahmer, that he was just, beside himself about the things that he did, but there was something inside of him that was making that happen too. And I have to believe that, at least in Brian's case, and the fact that I didn't know him, there was just something got stimulated in there that I think got away from him and couldn't control, because it's powerful, and he hadn't been around in life long enough to know how to harness that too well and to direct it. Energy is literally just a river, and when you dam it up and try to keep it at bay, it just gets more powerful. It gets heavier, it becomes more powerful by the nature of it simply backing up, as opposed to, creating a diversion for it, or, giving it an avenue, that it had a healthy release. And, as we were talking about my own story about, being a young guy and probably not that much different from Brian at one point in my life, and having a lot of intensity and turmoil and trauma going on, it literally kind of happened overnight where I got into the tattoo business, even though I knew these guys already. But all of a sudden, like, that energy had a place to go, and the guys I was around were not different than me and were able to help me direct it. And that's one thing about Brian that my heart again, we don't know that he did any of this, but my heart, whether he did or didn't, my heart still goes out to him, because, man, that's a tough place for a young person to be. Something inside of him that's just overpowering him. I don't know what that thing was, but it obviously was incredibly intense.
And Brian is said to have been alleged to have also been kind of more of an introverted kind of guy, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, if you have this, these internalized negative feelings, and you don't have anybody to talk to, see, you cannot release them through language. You can't get them out and while you're talking to someone about them. Okay, you can't turn these negative feelings and emotions into language and get rid of them if you're not talking about them, talking to someone about them. So what happens is they build up. Now, you talked about the river of energy. Okay, what we do, what we look at, is what we call the river of anger. Okay, and as long as everybody feels angry at times. I mean, if you don't feel angry, you're not human. Everybody feels angry. Okay, and there's different degrees of it. The best of the situation, the best way to deal with the situation is to let that river of anger flow. To keep talking about it. You ever notice when you're talking about something, you feel better? So if you're expressing that anger, you're getting it out, you're feeling better with it, right?
Yeah.
But unfortunately, with a lot of people, me being one too, when I was younger, I mean, there's no question about it. You're not supposed to, tough guys aren't supposed to express their feelings, right? I mean, that's
right. Yeah.
We're raised, right? So you keep it inside, you don't talk about it. And so that river of anger gets dammed up. And when that river of anger gets dammed up, it starts to overflow its banks. Okay. So that's when something that isn't flowing, emotions that aren't flowing, come out in a rageful form because they've overflowed their banks. It's been dammed up, for whatever reason. That anger has been kept inside, and now it's we call it also volcanic anger. It just builds up until it explodes, right? So the other thing is, when I look at Brian and I see this young man who committed suicide, allegedly killed Gabby, allegedly, woman he loved and was partners with, right? But what it really, I understand it, but I don't know what the specific live wire was inside of it. Was it, an insecurity issue? Was it an inadequacy issue? Was it an inferiority issue? Was it all together? I mean, because usually you become your biggest critic with this stuff inside your head. Okay, you've got this little, we call them, the internal critic or little bullshitter you have in your head that's, hitting you with all these thoughts, these thought distortions. And thoughts are very powerful because they create feelings. So if you don't sort them out, if you don't talk them out, if you don't clear the air, as I'm talking about, this is how it starts to build. And then all of a sudden, bang, that quick, 0 to 60. I just did something. Now, you mentioned Dahmer, okay? And what happens with serial killers is they have we call it a mask of sanity, where they're very nice, a lot of them very nice, amicable people, easy to talk to. Lots of them will help you out and do anything for you. But then something happens. Something pulls that switch. Something just clicks that. clicks in that brain. And we call it disassociation. And a lot of them disassociate. I don't think your sadistic serial killers disassociate. I think they're into the pain of the victim, so they have to be fully conscious of it to enjoy it and fully focused. But with many of them, like power and control killers, serial killers, I mean, I think it is, this mask of sanity that they can wear around everybody. And we've been told this by a number of serial killers that they feel alien walking around other people. They realize they're different than other people. And it's kind of like us and them kind of situation,
Yeah.
I mean, they separate themselves because they know they're acting out and they're being nice and cordial and everything else, but they know, that they're carrying a beast inside, that they have this internal beast that is just hungry, and that eventually it will need to go on the hunt, okay, for whatever their victim of choices or their desired victim, I'm sorry, is. So, but I mean, certainly that is not Brian to this point, as far as we know. I mean, in no way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
But what was eating at him inside? Something was, and he had an outlet through his art, which you're going over and have gone over. But obviously, as you mentioned, the symbolism can really compound things, right? I mean, if
You bet. Yeah.
you're just stuck in that world of grotesque symbols, or of a fantasy that just you felt was your life that just ended.
Yeah. Yeah. You see a lot of these guys that really try, it's almost like they've got a kind of an alter ego where they've like kind of adopted the symbolism, they've compartmentalized it, and a lot of them are pretty good, at kind of keeping it to the side. But, again, it's like, how intense is that to that person? How much energy are they damming up? How much are they storing up behind all that, a bit behind those pictures, behind the stuff that's going on, whatever it is internally with them, uh, we just don't know what was happening with Brian at all, which is sad too, because if we did, maybe somebody could have helped. Who knows?
Absolutely. Help is always out there. If
Yeah.
you pick yourself up and go sit down or lay down on a couch, okay, and talk to
Yeah.
somebody, or you have a really good friend or friends you can talk to. And again, turning it into language. Because when you look at it, I mean, it is just so absurd when you look at these many of these domestic violence cases. I love you. I've dreamed about our lives together. I've wanted to be with you. I've been with you. We've made a life together for years. These are our plans. Oh, geez, I'm sorry. I just killed you. I mean,
Yeah.
what? You just loved me. Now you just killed me. I mean, something snapped.
Yeah.
Okay. Lots of times, you'll see warning signs leading up to it. You'll see the abuse, start to escalate. And that's a cue, exit stage left, girl, get out of there. Right.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's, just amazing, because here they are on a trip going to enjoy, the country, and
Yeah.
traveling all over and stopping and laughing and carrying on and shooting and this and that. Then we start to hear about arguments in bars and restaurants and this and that, arguing with themselves, cops being involved and pulling them over. And, I mean, still trying to keep it together or staying together. The next thing you know, Gabby's dead.
Yeah.
Then Brian supposedly goes down to the reserve.
Mhm.
And again, I do believe the FBI, but again, everybody's innocent until proven guilty. I mean, and blows his brains out. And I'm sure, being the naturalist that he was, the environmentalist he was, had been in that reserve on a number of occasions. He understood what kind of animals are in there.
Oh,
I've been in swamps similar to that, not with gators, but I was in the Louisiana swamps with the pigs and the water moccasins and scorpions and all this and everything. So I mean, there's predators all around you.
all
Okay,
the time.
all
Yeah.
the time, all the time. So what was going through his mind, and again, we'd like any feedback from our audience. What we're doing is putting theories out there. These are only theories based on our professionalism and our intuition, our professional intuition. And so we're up for and interested in any feedback you have. What are your theories? What do you think? It's always important to us. As I've always said, 2 heads are better than 1 and 100 heads are better than 2, right? So we're up for that. Feel free to let us know what you think. And, the other thing too, I have to ask you this. I mean, because he was such a naturalist, an environmentalist, really was into nature, the drawings that looked like half man, half beast, we don't know for sure what it meant. But
Right.
as an artist, what is your take on it?
Yeah, when I see stuff like that, like when you go back and you look, and this is all over the globe, it really, you see that kind of blend with humans and animals, and a lot of it has to do with the fact that animals in the natural world carry so much just natural strength. They have an order, and they live by the order. It isn't one of a luxury life. It's kill or be killed, and survival of the fittest. And that doesn't always translate in mythology. I mean, there's a ton of examples of it. Going back to ancient Iraq. The first civilizations that we know of. But when you see stuff like that kind of in a modern context, again, it's like when people start, initially, I kind of thought like, wow, is he like aligning is he like actually trying to align himself with an actual animal? Like, is he thinking in terms of like, does he consider himself, like a shapeshifter or a therianthrope, someone who actually does believe that they're an animal? And we had talked, and I had run across people, a fair amount in the tattoo business that kind of like went in and out of those things. But it didn't know there was an actual word for it. But it turns out that there is. And I had given you an example. It wasn't aligned with an animal per se, but in our initial conversations, you see this kind of a lot, with the Gothic crowd, and there are people that, they're, like we all love Twilight and like all the cool vampire movies and stuff, but there are people that really have really adopted that persona. There's something going on, and they're like, when you're, when you don't think enough of yourself to be you adopt somebody else, right?
Exactly.
You take on a completely, you're not Bob the plumber anymore or whatever. You're now something bigger than the sum of your own parts. But I knew this guy early on in my tattoo career back in Oklahoma, and he was a guy that we all knew. And he was kind of a different kid. He had been through a lot of stuff, and he just was, life was just really beating him over the rocks all the time. And he had kind of started to gravitate toward that, kind of like, hey man, I'm a vampire, and over a little bit of time, like it started getting pretty intense with this guy to the point where he was like out drinking blood, with people. And like, I mean, literally, I don't mean it in a figurative sense, but he was up to all kinds of crazy stuff. And we're like, bro, what are you doing? Like this is in the 80s, the height of the AIDS epidemic and stuff. And we're like, man, like, we all love you. What are you doing? And, he just, I'm not going to, call out what was going on with him in his personal life and make that public because he was a dear friend. But, he had adopted this persona that just like led him into a tremendous amount of risk taking and like really risky behavior. But he was compartmentalizing that, like he wasn't him anymore. He was like this figure and he was doing, and he really didn't believe he could be harmed by what he was doing. Now that could be a physical harm or like a legal thing, like, hey man, like, go to jail for what I'm doing. Like he just was like, I'm not gonna receive anything bad because I've become this powerful, entity. But yeah, he was drinking blood and up to all kinds of risky stuff, and he died. He died as a result of it. He got AIDS and died. And that was one thing that made me think about Brian, and like, was he adopting like, an animal persona to have that power? And a lot of us do, like we look at animals and we admire them. And it's kind of cliche to say, obviously, but if you ask anybody, hey, what's your spirit animal, almost everybody will have an answer, whether it's a trout or a water buffalo or whatever it is. People will find things in the natural world, animals included, that they identify with, that there's characteristics about them that they either admire or try to kind of incorporate into their daily life. Maybe it's like a bird, like you're flying free and you're living a life that's kind of carefree, or it can be a symbol of success and attaining goals. But it made me wonder, is Brian like aligning himself kind of with this imagery in an animal sense to, did he feel overwhelmed, by, the success Gabby was having, because it like, yeah, they were doing it together, but that whole road show was about Gabby, and that's okay. Like, it totally is. Like, she was obviously like quite a character and like really good at what she was doing in terms of like, creating this cool like van life, travel blog or, video blog or whatever. And I thought that was super cool, but it was just like, wow, it's such a different thing than like his personal imagery. And I was like, wow, did that like just get, was he kind of bringing the stuff inside so that he felt like he had some power? Because, when you get social media attention or you get any kind of success in your endeavor, and it doesn't matter what it is, yeah, there is a certain amount of, you feel good about yourself. You feel like you got a little, weight behind you, like you got a little cred or street cred, with whatever you're doing. And, that can be an overwhelmingly positive thing. I mean, it was for me as a tattooer, as I was making my bones and coming up in the world and, traveling and learning from guys that were way better than me, and them sharing some secrets and helping me succeed. Because back then, the tattoo business was not like that at all. It was very close. But, I kind of think now, it's so easy to have a certain level of success on a personal basis with the cool, stuff that we got at our fingertips because of the internet and all the cool features that, and things that it has to offer. But it, that can, again, there's two sides, John, and there's two sides to everything. And, I had to wonder to myself, was that impacting Gabby in a creative and positive way? And was that impacting Brian in a, like, was he just looking at that going, wow, like, I don't feel like I'm part of this success? That, was it weighing on him? Was it making him feel down inside? Was it making him feel insecure? And if it was, again, I don't know, I never knew the guy. I have to believe something like that was going on. Now, there may have been trauma further back in his past. Who knows?
Usually, yeah.
Yeah, usually is, especially when, if indeed he did kill her. Like, I mean, he didn't just get mad one day and do it. Like, there had to have been stuff building up and building up, like you said, for, certainly more than a week. It'd been probably most of his life. Whether that was just a feeling of, and if you are an introvert, because I can engage socially pretty well, but man, I spend all my time by myself. But as a kid, that was pretty tough to adjust to, if it wasn't for like, racing and stuff like that, where it was like a real individualized sport, life would have been a bit harder. But you do walk around with that feeling of like, man, I am different. And it is isolating, and even talking to my own son, who's very good with music and social media and stuff. And he's also really introverted, but he's also good socially. But you see the impact that, not just social media, but media in general can have on people, whether they're young or old, and how it can like really shape, the lens that they're looking at themselves, because you can say and you can create anything and put it out there and say, this is me. And it might be complete bullshit. So it's, like kind of in my back pocket. I kind of consult with him sometimes to find out like, wow, like what are people feeling about, the stuff that's going on? Like, how are people your age taking in this kind of information? Like what kind of, like what kind of feelings are they having about it? And it's pretty mixed, so you really see the duality of how powerful, because the media, not the media like the news per se, but just the visual intake that we have with, the internet and computers and, Facebook or whatever it is, whatever your, blogging website, whatever. It's a big, powerful world, and it can.
Very powerful.
Yeah, and I'm looking at this young kid, who's obviously like engaged in a fair amount of that stuff. Like, man, was he just like really getting, was it shaping his lens in a way that he was not seeing it in a positive, creative way, but more of like, was it like pulling him internally further away, from, did he feel like that success that Gabby was attaining, did it feel like that was maybe pulling them apart? And maybe that was the one thing that he was really holding on to. And that was kind of the last stretch that could have potentially like really caused a lot of internal conflict for him. And I could absolutely see a young person like that, like identifying with the animal world, the natural world. It goes hand in hand with his, love of nature and, his camping and, traveling and stuff. And that really resonated with me in a big way. The only real bummer part is we don't get a chance to ask him.
Yeah, that's the sad part. No, we don't know, what flipped that switch. We don't know. We can surmise, but we really don't know, because Gabby's not around, he's not around.
Yeah.
And I just thought it was ironic, how she ended up, where she ended up, near the creek, and where he ended up, near the water. And it's a very sad situation. And we know there are other Bryans out there. We know there are other Gabbys out there. And there's so much symbolism, and we're bombarded with all these images all the time. And how healthy is it to submerge yourself into all this, and not have somebody that you can talk to and share this with, and kind of keep that river, that
Yeah,
anger,
absolutely.
that river of angry energy
Yeah.
flowing, so it doesn't overflow its banks.
Yeah. I really believe he was trying to manage that by putting that symbolism out in the world, because that is a way to an introvert would do it.
It's an outlet. It's an
Yeah.
outlet.
Yeah. To say, and it just isn't an uncommon thing. I got to believe that, man, it just really got away from him.
Yeah, yeah. Obviously, something happened.
Yeah, for sure.
Listen, I want to thank you so much for your time. We're going to have to break here. I want to thank you so much for your professionalism, for your time. What is your .com, or you've done a lot of great art, and we want to show that to our audience and show that to the public. How can people see your art?
Yeah, I have just like kind of it's really like a digital cardboard box of stuff that I just warehouse. It's, I'm not active anymore, so I just kind of put stuff in it. So it's not real glossy or anything like that. But if you go to blackfeatherdesign.typepad.com, you can kind of see what I've been up to in the tattoo world. Some other stuff in there, and I take stuff out and I put stuff in all the time. It just kind of gives you a little snapshot of some of the tattoo work and some of the mechanical stuff that I have been up to.
Yeah, I'd like our audience have the opportunity to take a look at it, and maybe some of our audience would be interested in contacting you.
Sure.
Can you send over a link, and we'll put a link up?
Yeah, I sent you a link this morning. I think I'll
Okay,
double check and
good.
make sure.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, great. And we'll put that in the description as well. And just one other thing too is that when it comes to talking about animals, and we were talking about how we're not very far divested from animals. I mean, all we have to do is think about our pets, cats, dogs, whatever. I mean, the business throughout the country for pets is off the charts.
Oh, yeah.
Like Chewy.com and everything. I mean, it's off the charts. So people, are very, very, very partial and in love.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of different types of animals out there. So because I looked up this Therian situation, and there are people out there who believe, that they are part wolf or follow that lifestyle. I mean, they know they're human, but they feel there's a part of them that's of the wild.
Absolutely.
And there's groups of them that get together and go out and howl and everything else. So it is, hey, look, whatever makes you happy. Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So anyway, thank you again so much. I want to thank our audience for being so gracious to put up with us for this long, and for all the comments that you've sent over. We continue to love your comments. We love your, as I said, your subscriptions. Please subscribe. Most importantly, this is a crazy, sometimes very unsafe world out there. Please stay safe, keep an eye out, and take care of yourself. Make it a great day, and God bless. And thanks again. I can't thank you again enough, to be honest with you. I mean, it was really, really a great show today. And
well, thank you, John, for having me on again. It's just fantastic to be able to talk to you, and it's always awesome. And
yeah, we always have a good talk. So Dustin,
we always do. Yeah.
You and your family be safe. Thank you so much.
You as well, John. Thanks so much.
Talk soon. Thank you.
You got it, buddy.